Welcome back, lacrosse friends, to Inside the World of Box Lacrosse. I'm going to be flying solo today. The internet did not want Adam to be part of this one. We did very much, but obviously it was not working out. So we're going to go forward. That's the nature of the beast. We saw that. Who was the? It was Damar Hamlin in Buffalo. Did you see that clip when they were trying to interview him? And it wasn't working. They were having tech issues. And he said, "What's going on, man? This is taking too long. I got to go ready." It happens everywhere. So
It does happen. It's kind of the nature of the beast when you're dealing with this. We've run into it with streams before. It's definitely not ideal, but yeah, the show must go on. So as
yeah.
you were, and what is our next section here?
Our next section is going to be one that Adam suggested of what is more concerning right now, the Philadelphia defense or the San Diego offense, both of which are having some issues for teams that are in the middle of the pack. I mean, Philly's 5-2. They're right up near the top, but giving up a lot of goals. So Adam and I were going to debate this, and it was his idea. And I was really looking forward to hearing his take on it, but I'll share mine with you. And I'm going to start with Philadelphia and take a look at it. And the thing is, I look at Philly and say, hey, they're giving up some goals, but they're kind of, they are sort of middle of the packish for goals against. They've had some games where they've given up a ton. They've been, I think, trending better probably. But look at historically over the last 4 full seasons. I'm not going to look at 2020 because that was the pandemic year and everyone played different numbers of games and things. They actually did quite well that year. Just to be fair to them, they had quite a successful defensive year. But 2019, they were 11th out of 11 teams in goals allowed. Absolutely dead last, gave up the most goals in the league. 2022, they're 8th out of 14 teams. 2023, expansion team comes in, they still drop one. They're 9th out of 15 teams. Last year, they were 14th of 15 teams in goals allowed. They have not been successful defensively. And all that was with Zach Higgins playing heroically as the very last line of defense. So I think they needed to make some changes. And I feel like it's been a while coming, but credit to Paul Day. He went out and made a bunch of change as the GM. Look at the group this year playing in the defensive zone for Philadelphia. Obviously, new goalie Higgins is gone. Nick Damoud is in. They have to get used to him. There are 10 defenders currently on their active roster. 6 were not with the team last year. It takes a while for that kind of massive change to really come into play and all come together and make a team better. And I think they're just going to get better and better as they go. So I really don't think it's a huge long-term problem. I think they're trending in the right direction. They also have Mitch Armstrong on the IR, and he's going to help when he comes back as well. So I don't know, Greg, if you have any thoughts on it, but I feel
I
like
actually do, because this was something that you really taught me last year that I didn't really pay attention to or know is as the year goes on, I asked you if the goalies were getting better, but the way you explained it is the cohesion of the defense, everybody understanding how the slides are working, understanding what your other guys are doing, kind of makes the season go on. I didn't realize they changed that many defenders. I was more impressed giving Damoud the credit, only kind of watching a couple of games, but more clipping the highlights than actually watching. So that does explain a lot to me. So you would expect, at least from my perspective of the way you explained it to me, that this Philadelphia team's only going to be getting better.
I think so. I actually have that as a note that they should get better as the season goes on. I think they'll really start to hit their stride next year as it grows. And if you watch Philly, again, this will happen less, but there's a few plays in every game they have where somebody's kind of selling out on a defensive play that clearly somebody else doesn't know he's going to do. And there are some wide open looks that they look awful because it's just the guys aren't used to each other, the communication and knowing that somebody's going to jump something, somebody's going to go that's part of the defense, but they're still getting used to each other. But, you've got guys like McCannell back there and, Burton and Patton and all the additions that
Well,
I
that
think are
being
really
said,
awesome.
do you think that's part of Albany's problem too? Because something nobody talks about is the turnover rate, because their big name players didn't turn over, they just added somebody. But that defense has added a few new guys. They lost Leo
Yeah.
Sturos, Wagner's out, Watkinson's out. I mean, I would say like the Albany defense, the biggest issue they're having right now is just guys staying healthy. It's basically a brand new defense some nights.
100%. I mean, Watkinson's huge. they've had Nick Tchaikovsky, who is a glue guy for that defense, missed a couple of games. I'm not sure he's been 100% effective since he's been back. He's playing well, but I think he's still getting back into what he is.
You're
Like
not
you
seeing
said,
the speed. Like, I mean, his
yeah,
transition with the breakaways is definitely not what it was when he got hurt. No, I think, and as you
that's
were talking about,
Nishimura out as well.
yeah,
They've had a
and when you
ton of
talk
injuries.
speed, though, that guy runs all day. So really, you're missing a lot of those long running guys. Sturos not being there this year because they didn't re-sign him. I mean, so
Mhm.
that's another veteran guy, and you brought in a bunch of new guys last year, and then I got to ask you, how do you think Albany goes from there then? I mean, are they getting healthier? Are things going in? Or do you think they don't even need it as much because of the way they played, or was it just because it was Colorado?
Um, no, I think I think it was coming together. They're still missing some guys. I mean, Watkinson is still out, right? And
Yeah.
you look at their IR list, and they've got some issues. They're going to have one of those miraculous turnarounds when their guys get healthy. They'll suddenly be better, and people are like, "Oh my
Everybody.
God, see, they figured it out." And it's like, yeah, they all got healthy. Glenn Clark was saying, as much as they had fortune last year in barely having any injuries, and he said that was a huge part of them improving so much is they were healthy. They just had their team together. Whereas this year they've been missing so many guys. He had to go and sign people, free agents, to have enough players on the roster to have healthy scratches, which you have to have. And sometimes it'd be late in the week and you got to go and get somebody because somebody gets hurt in practice or wherever. And you have to have, but as per the collective bargaining agreement, you have to have 21 players dressed, right? Or sorry, 19 of your 21 dress. You have to dress those guys. You have to have the two healthy scratches. You can't just leave a vacant roster spot. So they were signing guys sometimes on kind of short notice. Now they brought Carson Moyer and they were thrilled to get him. And there's lots of good players out there, but you have to find someone who is available right away and will fit into what you want. Like they're cobbling things together at times, and that's a huge factor. I think they're going to be okay.
Yeah, especially depending on the injuries, as long as he does get healthy, that is a good point. So with the San Diego team, though, what do you think that offense, or do you think Dixon and Dobie were a bigger part of that?
I mean, Dixon and Dobie were both, not at the best last year. Dixon had some injuries. Dobie just wasn't as effective as usual. Dobie can tend to wear down a little bit, right? I mean, he's an older player and not exactly a gym rat, fitness devotee.
Well, you,
So
you see him and Benesh, they do great at the beginning of the year, but by the end of the season, they're kind of beat down, has always been my impression of those guys.
yeah, I mean, Benny seems to find a way to hang on because he's not a spending all day every day in the gym guy either, but he has worked to get himself ready to go. I think, but you do have some older guys. I mean, we mentioned when they lost Dixon, Dobie, and who was the third guy that left this year? They bring in Hellier, McIntosh, and Benesh. They lost three of the older players on their team and in the league, and they got older. It's kind of unbelievable, right? And that's a factor. But I think it's they came out flying at the beginning, and those guys were all great. And they've got Westberg. I think it will come along. Again, you got to get used to each other. One thing that's I think is going to have an impact for them is the Dylan Watson trade, and not necessarily because of Dylan Watson. He's a good player, a former second overall pick. I think he's a nice addition for them, but it means it is the impetus. Zach Currier is now going full-time at the back door. He's going to be back as a D-transition player. And Zach Currier was doing a good job for them at forward. He's a good player up front, right? He's a great athlete, good player. He's, I would say, of an average NLL forward, which means he's in the top probably 60 forwards on the planet. He's a really, really good forward. But think about it. As a D-transition player, where does he rank on your list? Conservatively top 5, right? Probably top 1.
He's definitely up there. I mean, no matter how you look at it, when you have guys that can play like that, and he's not a liability on defense. You see
No.
some of these guys when they first get into having to play, because I'm like, why is this guy not good? And then you explain, oh well, he actually has played offense the whole time through. Just got drafted in, and his chance was on transition. You see guys get beat up top, they try to hide him in the defense, it doesn't work, and he's definitely not one of those guys. And the fact that he can
He
go out.
was, though.
Yeah.
That's the interesting thing. In junior, he was always looking to go. He was always looking to take off and get the transition, which was fantastic. I mean, he's an awesome he was awesome in transition even back then, but he was a bit of a liability defensively because of that. And when he went up to senior, the senior Peterborough Lakers, the first summer he was in senior, said, "We don't care if you run the ball. We don't care if you transition. We have guys who can do that, and your speed will let you do that. Even just, there can be a loose ball, you can just pick it up, just run away. You'll run away." He's one of the fastest guys around. So just focus on defense. And he was awesome. He just worked so hard at it. I remember him going up against Six Nations, and I think it was in the playoffs, and he was covering Dan Dawson and just did such a great job against a guy who's so hard to defend. And I thought, wow, that's been a really productive summer for him. And he carried that over. I mean, now, like, he's the single season record holder for caused turnovers in the National Lacrosse League. I mean, and of course, the other guy whose record he broke is Kyle Rubish, who he's beside on that defense. So
that's what I was just going to say, though, is, I mean, when you've got guys like Kyle Rubish there to, yeah, I mean, he already was a fairly seasoned player, but you got to really expect the defense is going to get better. What are your thoughts on their goalie? I'm not going to try to butcher his name right now.
Frank Chiliano?
Yes.
Oh, no, sorry, Chris Origlieri.
But
goalie, yeah.
That's what I meant, though, is really like looking at it from this season. How do you think that decision has panned out as far as they basically went with Origlieri because they said Chigliano was too old? Is that, or I screwed it up? You know what I mean?
Oh, my God. Origlieri. I don't even know how you say it. It's like you say it differently every time. Chris Origlieri.
I might get it right once in a while, so I try to just say it wrong.
If you just try enough variations, eventually one of them is going to be right. So Origlieri, I mean, he's obviously a very good young goalie. One of my things I wrote about in the preseason, I do 3 questions for every team. And I said, is Origlieri an elite goaltender? He was a finalist for the league's Goalie of the Year award last year. He obviously had a great season. He was a top 5 guy for our voting for top goalie in IL Indoor. And my thoughts in the preseason was he hasn't done it long enough to know if he's elite, because he made some great adjustments, did a fantastic job as a young goalie and getting used to it and playing very well for that team. But the league will adjust to whatever someone does, and they've adjusted, and he's got to adjust back. And he's been pretty good this year. If you look at his career and you look at how he's playing this year and think, okay, that's kind of the normal trajectory of a young goalie, gradually getting better, definitely some setbacks, right? Then it would be normal. I think by being so good last year, he kind of put himself in this position by raising the bar, because you set expectations. All of a sudden people are like, why aren't you being great every week? It's like, well, because he's human and he's 22 years old.
Yeah, I forget he is that young when you say that. I'm always like, oh, man. And
Yeah.
so speaking of young goaltenders, what did you think of Getty getting the start with Vegas? I was not happy Albany had to get rid of him. I understand why, but as a backup goalie, I was very impressed with him.
Okay. Yeah, he's a good goaltender, right? He's a good young goaltender. He's young and has to recognize that he is going to have to keep fighting to play, right? So they give him a chance, and he came out and did it. He played great for them, and a huge win, obviously, in that game over San Diego. And I think it's fairly clear, anyone who's read and watched me over the years, I'm a pretty big Landon Kells fan. I think he's a terrific goaltending prospect, great young man. I think he's suffered some of the issues that a young goalie who's handed the reins of a young expansion franchise is going to suffer. And things have not been great performance success-wise for the team. So he's faced some of that. He will rebound, I believe. I think Kells is going to be great. And if they have them as a 1-2 punch, it doesn't happen that often these days, right? And I think Getty can fit into that quite well. We used to have, a recent one, relatively recent, was Tyler Carlson and Evan Kirk in Minnesota came in as rookies together and both played well. They really split things, and they both played very well. It used to be Tyler Richards and Matt Roy in the summer and in the winter at times. They would just be alternating as goalies, and you used to have a lot more teams
same team for summer and winter.
Sometimes, yeah. In the summer for sure, they were in New West together quite a lot, and then they moved around. I mean, Richards was spent a lot of time in Vancouver, and Royk was there, and then he was in Toronto and things. But yeah, you used to have more of that. Even the most recent, I guess, that was really common was Brandon Miller and Nick Rose. When Rosie was just getting established as a starter, and they brought Brandon Miller in, and he played a ton. Was maybe the best goalie in the year the one season. So maybe that's something they wind up with, or maybe they just decide, hey, one of them is the guy partway through this season, depending how it goes. I think if I'm coaching them, I'm starting Justin Getty next game. Again, as a huge Landon Kells fan, he played great. Why wouldn't you go back to him? It's like Halifax when Dylan Hutchison came in and played so well. Of course you go back to him. He stopped every shot he faced in a game, right? You go back to him. They went back to Warren Hill because Hutchison had a bit of an off game. So, it's these things evolve. They're ever changing. But yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating to see whether they go with a 1-1A or if one of those guys steps forward and becomes the guy.
Yeah, that is. But I have dragged this tangent on for way too long. Let's go to a break
Right?
and we will come back and go over the results from last week. And I have checked the email. Adam has sent in his
Yes.
pick, so we will get to that after. But we will be right back in about a minute. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in.